Welcome to the Boxing Gossip channel. Please hit subscribe if you're new. Thanks for tuning in. I've just watched the Dillian Whyte versus Lucas Browne press conference. I'm going to give a quick shout out to Matchroom for streaming the press conference. I know Matchroom is a very divisive company amongst the hardcore boxing fans, but for me, always good to see stuff like this being made accessible via the internet and available to fans. From my perspective, it was good because it was something I was able to watch over lunch, so that it didn't conflict with the working day. And, for me, just the more access, the better. So, Lucas Browne versus Dillian Whyte, the press conference. Lucas Browne starts off by being a bit quieter spoken. When it's his turn to speak, he isn't really laying into Dillian Whyte. He's semi-respectful. Dillian Whyte is kind of leaning forward. You can see that he's almost chomping at the bit, raring to go, to be sort of let loose on Lucas Browne. And, when it's Dillian Whyte's turn, it begins. So, Dillian Whyte brought up a number of pretty contentious issues throughout the press conference. He went in on Lucas Browne for taking drugs. He referred to him on numerous occasions throughout the course of the press conference as a junkie, and how he was addicted to steroids. Dillian Whyte then made reference to comments that Lucas Browne had made, or a photograph Lucas Browne had posted, which referenced an orangutan, with the suggestion being that there was a racial slur against Dillian Whyte there. Whyte persisted by proceeding to say that Lucas Browne looked like chlamydia. So, not looked like he had chlamydia, but actually looked like chlamydia, which was an interesting remark. It probably wasn't the classiest of exchanges, but then again, we probably expected nothing less given the history between these two and the state of play for what was going on. Dillian Whyte also, just when I'm looking at my notes, he also made a comment that if Lucas Browne felt that he could come to Dillian Whyte's city and talk about punching Dillian Whyte in the face, he wouldn't make it back to Australia alive. So Dillian Whyte was really in full sales mode today. I don't know if he's on some sort of bonus. I presume he is. Like, the more tickets he sells, or the more publicity there is around the fight, he'll get more money. But he was very much in hype mode, trying to build a fight and trying to use every possible way of getting as much bad blood up there as possible. So, obviously there was the conversation about racism, there was the conversation about chlamydia, there was the conversation about drugs and steroids, there was the conversation about Lucas Browne not making it back to Australia alive. These are all clips that will get picked up. Maybe they'll get some coverage in the newspapers tomorrow, I don't know. I can imagine that certain comments, clips highlighting those comments will go viral on YouTube, and IFL TV will probably have them up this evening, and they'll be getting loads and loads and loads and loads of views and generating even more interest in this fight. So, Dillian Whyte's probably done a decent job of generating a lot more hype. My personal take is that he needs to be a little bit careful about. The old expression is people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, and Dillian Whyte himself has a failed drug test. Now, a lot of boxing fans seem to be happy to wave that under the carpet and forget about it, because the suggestion is that Dillian Whyte mistakenly took a pre-workout product, which was the reason he failed the test. Later on in the press conference, Dillian Whyte insinuated that it was ridiculous that Lucas Browne, who'd had previous performance-enhancing drug controversies, would yet again have failed a performance-enhancing drugs test for a pre-workout. He was trying to insinuate that it wasn't a pre-workout Lucas Browne had taken, and that it was ridiculous that Lucas Browne would suggest that it was a pre-workout. But I think Dillian Whyte needs to be a little bit careful there, because if it was absolutely ridiculous for Lucas Browne to have failed a drug test due to a pre-workout, then with the same logic you could say it was absolutely ridiculous that Dillian Whyte failed a drug test for taking a pre-workout, albeit that Dillian Whyte didn't have a history of a failed test prior to that. So I think he needs to be a little bit careful on that front. I'm sort of unsure of the back history with the alleged racist comment. But what I can say is that Dillian Whyte makes a number of highly controversial remarks in certain interviews, especially ones I've seen on IFL TV, that relate to that subject himself, and it would be very, very, very easy for someone to run through previous interviews that Dillian Whyte has done and pick out certain comments he has made, that may not be considered politically correct. Let's put it that way. So, Dillian Whyte's kind of torn into Lucas Browne on both of those fronts, and my take is it wouldn't actually take too much scratching below the surface to find out that, Dillian Whyte maybe had some questions to answer on both of those fronts as well. And, I think Dillian Whyte views himself as completely innocent for the drug test controversy that he had earlier on in his career. But we must accept that there are those out there who believe that Lucas Browne is a bit of a victim of the system as well. My take on that is I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on whether Dillian Whyte and Lucas Browne are drug cheats who should be classed as drug cheats. I know there's a lot of people in boxing who think they deserve a second chance. I know there's a lot of people in boxing who would, who don't have interest in this fight because they think both of the competitors are drug cheats. So my take on that is more neutral. I don't have a strong opinion either way, if you like. But I do think there's, a little bit of an element of people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. And I think on a few of the topics that Dillian Whyte was picking at Lucas Browne for, he may be falling foul of that statement. Let's put it that way. What else can I tell you? Lucas Browne's weight, I think that's something to take note of. One of my subscribers mentioned on the podcast yesterday that Lucas Browne put on social media that he was currently weighing over 20 stone. And, looking at him in the press conference today, clearly he's a guy with a very, very big frame. He's a very heavy-set guy. And he can probably walk around at 19, 20 stone without being morbidly obese, like most of us would be at that weight. But he does look very, very heavy. And I do think that's a key, because if I look back at Lucas Browne's previous performances, the heavier he's been, the less destructive and the less capable he's looked. And a lot of people who are picking Lucas Browne to win this fight, a lot of them think he might have an edge in boxing advantage over Dillian Whyte. But I think that edge, if it exists, will be completely nullified if he comes in massively heavy for this fight. So, that's a concern for me. I appreciate we're a long way off fight night yet, and he's got time to lose the weight. But I would have been slightly more comfortable if he'd kept in exceptional condition between the two fights. Let's put it that way. Frank Buglioni versus Callum Johnson has been re-announced for the undercard of this fight. And Eddie Hearn also alluded to the fact that there may be some more heavyweight action on the bill. So, Dave Allen's fighting on the undercard of Kell Brook. There's been a lot of links with David Price fighting on the undercard of Anthony Joshua. So it wouldn't take the wildest guess to think that maybe Eddie Hearn was referring to Derek Chisora, and maybe Derek Chisora will fight on this undercard as well. I don't know. Maybe Eddie Hearn wants Derek Chisora on the undercard as a bit of an insurance policy, so that if Whyte were to lose, there'd still be some good money to be made by matching him up against Derek Chisora. And obviously having Chisora on the undercard will keep their names together and keep that link going. I don't know. Callum Johnson versus Buglioni for the British and Commonwealth as like a sort of co-main event. It's a decent fight that, when that fight was made first time around, I actually suggested that it's very, very possible that there's some upset potential in that fight. Obviously, Callum Johnson has had some medical issues outside of the ring. I don't actually know the full details of those, so I don't know how serious they are. And Eddie Hearn did mention that he still needed to get the all okay from his doctors. So I hope that's not a factor that influences the fight. But if Callum Johnson's at his best, he may have the beating of Frank Buglioni. It's certainly a very, very competitive fight. And, it's an okay fight. It's a good trade fight. But it's not a fight that gets my pulse racing. And whatever the reason is for that, I don't know. Callum Johnson's profile has been low. He hasn't really been active. He hasn't really been involved in noteworthy fights that have entertained the fans and caught fire, So maybe it's something to do with the opponent. But with all the talk of Anthony Yard and, Frank Buglioni, whilst I never suspected that fight was going to happen for one moment, especially not on this bill, it does kind of leave you feeling a bit flat when you're talking about Bullioni Callum Johnson, even though I would admit it's not a bad fight in its purest form. Anyway, let me know your take, guys. What did you make of this press conference? Did you enjoy it? Was it entertaining? Did it build hype? Let me know your comments on any of the content that I've said in this video. As always, please hit subscribe. Please hit the thumbs up button to support this video. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it.